"Some man will be lucky to have you," the Duke said. The roses hung full-blown and heavy in the summer heat, and a bee worked the lavender at the path's edge, and Rosalind Carew heard her own pulse louder than either. She had spent the better part of a fortnight rehearsing prudence, the small, safe answers a young woman gave to a man who held her future in his keeping. She let all of it go in a single breath. "I was rather hoping for you," she said. The gravel under his boots went still. He had been walking a half-pace ahead of her, hands clasped behind his back the way he held them when he meant to seem at ease, and now he stopped as though the path had ended in air. A blackbird sang somewhere in the limes. The fountain at the centre of the parterre kept up its small, indifferent music, and the water smell of it reached her, cool against the bruised sweetness of the roses, and still he did not turn. "You will forgive me," he said at last. "I think I cannot have heard you." "You heard me perfectly, Your Grace." Her gloved hands had folded themselves at her waist without her permission. The kid was warm and faintly chalk-scented against her wrists. "You have excellent hearing. You heard Mrs. Penhallow drop a teaspoon 3 rooms away on Tuesday and rang for it to be seen to before she had finished blushing. Now," he turned. Julian Ashcombe, 5th Duke of Wexford, was not built like a man who blushed. He filled the gap in the yew hedge the way a door fills its frame, broad through the shoulder. His coat of dark summer superfine strained faintly across the back when he moved, and a workman's breadth to the hands that did not at all match the signet on his smallest finger. He was 27, and looked, in that moment, a great deal younger, as though she had reached past every year of his consequence and pressed a thumb to something unguarded. "Miss Carew," his voice had gone very level. She had learned, in the 6 weeks she had lived beneath his roof, that he reached for that levelness the way other men reached for a railing. "You have been 3 months in mourning grey for a father who thought the world of you, and a year before that nursing him, and I think the heat has nothing to do with it." A drop of perspiration traced the line of her spine beneath the muslin, and she ignored it. "And you will not hand me back my grief to make this easier for yourself. That is unworthy of you, and you are not, whatever you pretend, an unworthy man." The bee lifted from the lavender and bumbled between them and away. His jaw moved once, as if he had bitten down on the first 3 things he meant to say. "I made your father a promise," he said. "I know what you promised him. I was in the room." She had been, at the foot of the narrow bed in the rented house in Bath, the window open to the gulls and the smell of the sea 2 streets off, her father's hand thin as paper in hers. "You promised you would see me well married. You did not promise it would be to a stranger. Rosalind." He used her name the way a man sets down something he is afraid of breaking, and the sound of it in his mouth undid something in her chest that she had been holding together by main force since April. "I am the worst marriage in England a sensible woman could make." "Then it is fortunate," she said, "that I have never once been accused of sense. For one heartbeat, she saw it cross his face. Not refusal. The opposite of refusal, swiftly shuttered, the way a man closes a book on his finger to keep the place while pretending he has finished reading. Then the levelness came down again like a sash window, and he bowed, precise and terrible. "You do me an honour I cannot accept," he said, "and we will neither of us speak of it again." He walked back toward the house. She watched his shoulders against the bright bank of delphiniums and the hot blue summer sky, and she thought, "We will both of us speak of nothing else for the rest of our lives." She did not call after him. She let the fountain fill the silence, and she pressed 2 fingers to her own mouth, and she discovered that she was not in the least sorry. She would be, perhaps, by dinner. She was not yet. The house at Wexford rose out of its park like something the last century had set down and forgotten to take in at night, long, honey-coloured, 200 windows catching the 4 o'clock sun, the stone warm enough to hold the heat of the whole afternoon in its skin. Rosalind had come to it in May, a parson's orphan but for a gentleman's blood, with 1 trunk of dyed gowns and a letter of introduction she had not needed. because the Duke had sent his own carriage to the receiving house in Bath before she had finished wondering how she would pay for the post. That was the thing about him that nobody in the drawing rooms understood, because he never let them. The cut direct he could deliver across a ballroom. The cool nod. The door closed in a managing mama's face. And then, where no one was looking, the carriage sent, the physician's account quietly settled, the warm room and the fire lit in June, because she had once said, idly, that she felt the damp. She had catalogued these things the way another woman might press flowers. She had not meant to fall in love with him. She had meant to be grateful and biddable, and gone by Michaelmas into the keeping of whatever good, dull man he chose. She had managed grateful for nearly a month. "You are flushed," said the dowager, when Rosalind came in through the long windows of the morning room. "Either you have been running, which is vulgar, or you have been quarrelling with my grandson, which is futile. Sit down and tell me which." Augusta Ashcombe, Dowager Duchess of Wexford, sat very upright in a chair by the cold hearth, with a frame of netting untouched in her lap and a glass of barley water at her elbow she plainly considered an insult. She was beautiful in the way old carved ivory is beautiful, fine, hard, yellowed at the edges, and worth a great deal more than the soft new things around it. She missed nothing. She had told Rosalind so on her first evening, with evident satisfaction. "Neither, ma'am," Rosalind said, and sat. The dowager's gaze travelled over her, the high colour, the unsteady hands, the mouth that would not quite settle. "You are a shocking liar, child, which I count among your few virtues, since it means you will never embarrass me by being any good at it. Pour me something with gin in it. The barley water is my physician's revenge upon me for living. Dr. Frayne would have my head. Dr. Frayne is 40 miles off, and may keep his head and yours. Half a glass." Rosalind crossed to the side table, glad of the errand, glad of anything that turned her back to the room, while her face composed itself. The decanter stopper came free with a small glass shriek. The summer light lay in long gold bars across the carpet, and through the window she could see the avenue of limes, and a gardener's boy walking a barrow of cut delphiniums up toward the house, the blue of them almost violent in the sun. "He is going to marry me to Mr. Stanhope," she said, to the window. "Is he?" The dowager's voice did not change at all, which was how Rosalind had learned to know when something had landed. "And does Mr. Stanhope know of this honour, or is he still under the happy impression that he is his own man?" "Mr. Stanhope arrives Thursday." Rosalind set the half-glass at the old woman's elbow, and did not sit. "He has 4,000 a year, and a property in Hampshire, and a mother who is said to be agreeable, and he is, by every account, a thoroughly good man." "He is a thoroughly good blancmange," said the dowager. "I have met him. He has the conversational range of a well-bred turnip, and he will worship you, which you will find, within the 12-month, considerably worse than being struck." She lifted the glass, considered it, drank, and what, pray, does my grandson imagine he is doing? Handing you across the table to a turnip like the salt? Rosalind opened her mouth to give the safe answer. "Honouring my father. Doing his duty. Seeing me well." It was on her tongue, smooth and finished and false. "He is being a coward," she said instead, and her own voice surprised her, low and quite steady. "He is the bravest coward I have ever met, ma'am, and I have just told him so to his face in the Rose Walk, and I think I have ruined everything, and I would not take it back if you put me on the road tonight." The dowager set down her glass. For a long moment the only sound in the room was the fountain through the open window and, far off, the chime of the stable clock striking the half-hour. The old woman's eyes, they were the Duke's eyes, grey and direct, the inheritance unmistakable, went over Rosalind's face with the unhurried attention of a jeweller deciding whether a stone was paste. "Sit down," she said. "Not there. Here, where I can see you." Rosalind sat. "My grandson," said the dowager, "was 8 years old when his father gambled away the better part of this estate's good name, and a parcel of its land besides, and 11 when the rest of the family's troubles fell on him entire, and he has spent every year since paying for the privilege of a name he did not choose. He has restored the land. He has restored the name. He has done it by being, in public, precisely as cold as the world expected a Wexford to be. Because the one time that a Wexford was seen to feel something openly, it cost this family everything it had. She paused. Do you understand me, child? He learned, very young, that the safest thing a man of his blood can do is to want nothing where anyone can see him want it. The clock finished striking. Somewhere below, a door opened and closed. That is the saddest thing I have ever heard, Rosalind said. It is not in the least sad, it is extremely effective. He is the most respected man in 3 counties, and he sleeps perfectly well, I am sure. Every night of his life, alone. The dowager's hand moved on the arm of the chair. Once, a small involuntary thing, smoothing nothing. And now a penniless girl with her father not 3 months gone has stood in my rose walk and told him she would rather have him than 4,000 a year, and he has bowed and walked away. Because that is the only thing a lifetime of caution has left him able to do. She looked up. You have not ruined everything, Miss Carew. You have done something far more dangerous. You have given him a thing to refuse. He will refuse it beautifully, and it will keep him awake, which barley water has signally failed to do. Rosalind found she could not speak. Thursday, the dowager said, picking up her netting at last, you will be charming to Mr. Stanhope, because there is no profit in cruelty to a turnip, and because nothing in this world will unsettle my grandson faster than the sight of you behaving exactly as he has ordered. A thread slid through her fingers. I have not been so entertained since the year the river flooded the bishop's library. Go and dress. You have grass on your hem, and a look on your face that wants attending to before dinner. Dinner was a long, glittering, miserable affair, and the Duke did not come to it. He sent his regrets by the under-butler, estate business with his man of affairs, his grace begs the ladies will not wait, and Rosalind ate 3 courses across from an empty chair with the candle flames doubling in the polished mahogany, and the dowager keeping up a flow of wickedly comfortable talk that asked nothing of her. The beef was very good. She could not have said so under oath. Every time the door at the foot of the room opened to admit a footman with a fresh dish, her whole body turned toward it like a plant toward a window, and every time it was not him, and the dowager watched her do it over the rim of her glass and said nothing, which was a mercy and was also unbearable. After, she could not go up. The night was too warm, and her thoughts too loud, and so she took a candle and went the wrong way, out through the long gallery where the dead and gone Wexfords looked down from their frames, and into the library, which she had no business in, at 11 at night, in her stocking feet, with her hair half down. There was a fire lit, low, though the night did not need it, and there was the Duke, in his shirt-sleeves, with a ledger open before him, and his coat thrown over a chair back, and his cravat gone entirely. Asleep over the work he had used to escape her, his head down on his folded arm, the candle guttering at his elbow. One broad hand still loosely closed around a pen, gone dry. Rosalind stood in the doorway and did not breathe. She had never seen him so. Awake, he was all governance, the straight back, the level voice, the careful inch of distance he kept between himself and every soft thing in the world. Asleep, the management had fallen away from his face entirely, and what was left was only a tired young man who had carried something too heavy for too long, and had not, she thought, slept properly in years. The firelight moved on his cheek. A strand of dark hair had fallen across his brow. His shirt was open at the throat, and she could see the pulse beating there, steady and human and utterly unguarded, and the sight of it went through her like cold water and like warm wine at once. She ought to go. Every rule she had ever been taught stood in the doorway with her, scandalized, and pointed back up the stairs. She crossed the room instead. The carpet was thick and silent under her stockinged feet. The fire breathed. She lifted his coat from the chair back, fine wool, still warm, smelling of cedar and ink and the faint clean salt of him, and she laid it gently over his shoulders, and her hand, betraying her entirely, did not at once let go. His eyes opened. For one moment, before the governance came back, he looked up at her with his whole unshuttered face, and she saw in it, plain as print, the thing the dowager had promised would keep him awake. Not surprise, not displeasure, but a wanting so naked and so long denied that her breath caught on it like a thorn. Then he sat up, and the coat slid, and his hand closed hard around her wrist, not to pull her closer, to hold her still, at arm's length, the way a man holds the thing he most wants exactly far enough away that he cannot reach it. "Miss Carew," he said, and his voice was not level at all. "What in God's name are you doing in my library?" "I came for a book," she said, and found a far more interesting volume left open on the desk. His thumb was against the thin skin of her inner wrist. She knew, and he knew, that he could feel her pulse going like a bird's there, and that she could feel his quick, the lie of his composure given away by half an inch of skin. "Go to bed," he said. "Tell me to," she said. "As though you mean it. And I will go this instant and never speak of any of it again. I will be charming to Mr. Stanhope on Thursday. I will marry him in the autumn, and you may give me away yourself, and I will never once look at you across a room in a way that anyone could read. I will do it, Julian. I am not a child, and I do not throw myself at things. Only tell me to go, and mean it, and it is done." The fire snapped. Outside, the warm dark pressed at the tall windows, full of the smell of the night stocks the gardeners had set under the library wall, sweet and heavy and reckless. He looked at her wrist in his hand as though it belonged to someone else. And he did not, for the length of 3 breaths, tell her anything at all. That was the moment, she would think afterward, when there had still been a road back, when one cold word from him would have ended it, and one from her would have spared them both. They were neither of them ever able to say, later, which of them had let it pass. Only that the clock on the chimney-piece ticked through it, and the candle drowned itself in its own wax, and his grip on her wrist gentled, slowly, into something that was no longer a refusal, and that, in the doorway behind them, very quietly, someone cleared their throat. The throat clearing came a second time, and it was not a servant's. Julian's hand opened around her wrist as though the skin of it had turned to a live coal, and Rosalind stepped back into the cool air between them, and they both turned toward the door at once, like children caught at the jam. A woman stood in the doorway, with a branch of candles held a little before her, so that the light fell up across her face and made of it something carved and golden and entirely composed. She was perhaps 45 and beautiful, the way a frost is beautiful, a long elegant throat, dark hair barely silvered, a travelling cloak of deep plum still about her shoulders, and the dust of the road on its hem. She looked at the open ledger, and the thrown coat, and the bare throat of the Duke of Wexford, and the parson's orphan in her stocking feet with her hair down her back, and she smiled with great kindness, and no warmth at all. "Julian," she said, "how charmingly you keep your library. I had thought to find it empty at this hour. One lives and learns." "Aunt!" He was on his feet. The levelness had come back into him so fast and so completely that Rosalind felt the loss of the other man like a draught. He reached for his coat and put it on with no haste whatever, which was somehow worse than haste. "I did not look for you before Thursday. No, that was rather the point of coming Wednesday." She drifted into the room, and the candle flames leaned. The roads were dry, and Stanhope's mother is a tedious traveller, so I outran them by a day to see how the land lay before the formalities begin. I am glad I did. Her gaze came to rest on Rosalind, and stayed, and grew minutely warmer, which was the most frightening thing it had done yet. "You will present me, I think, to the young lady." "Lady Rosalind Carew," the Duke said, "my father's sister." "Aunt, Miss Carew, who is under my protection until her marriage, under your protection." Lady Otterline let the words sit in the warm air a moment, turning them, finding them amusing. How nobly you put things, Julian. You always did. Miss Carew, you have a very pretty colour. The summer suits you. Or something does. Lady Otterline. Rosalind sank into the curtsy, and was grateful that 22 years of being poor and watched had taught her to make her hands behave even when the rest of her wished to run. Forgive me. I came down for a book and stayed too late over it. Of course you did. Books are such an absorbing temptation, and one so easily forgets the hour. The frost smiled. And your shoes, I dare say, in all the excitement of the plot. There was nothing to answer to that. The fire snapped in the grate. Somewhere far off in the sleeping house a clock tolled the 3/4, and Rosalind stood in the small hot silence and felt the whole shape of her future tilt and begin, very gently, to slide. It is late, the Duke said, and Miss Carew is tired. Aunt, the green rooms are made up. They are always made up. And I will have Mrs. Penhallow roused to see you settled. Do not trouble the good woman. I know my way about this house better than you do, child. I was born in the East Wing. Lady Otterline turned her candle toward the door, and at the threshold she paused, as the truly skilled always pause, on the line that is meant to be remembered. Miss Carew, walk up with me. 2 women abroad at midnight are a chaperonage. One is a paragraph. You would not wish to give the servants a paragraph. It was not an invitation. Rosalind looked once at the Duke, and he did not look at her. He looked at the fire, his jaw set, a man holding a railing in a sea, and she understood that he could not help her here without making it worse, and that he knew it, and that the knowing was its own punishment. Good night, Your Grace, she said. Good night, Miss Carew. A beat. The book, he added, you may keep. She went out after his aunt with the candle, making their 2 shadows long and thin up the great dim stair, and she did not trust herself to wonder what he had meant. The stair was cold under her stocking feet after the warm carpet of the library, the old oak treads worn into hollows by 2 centuries of Wexford comings and goings, and the long windows on the half landing stood open to the night, so that the smell of the night stocks came up from the library wall below, sweet and shameless. Lady Otterline climbed without hurry, one ringed hand on the banister, and did not speak until they had turned the corner out of any possible hearing. You are not a fool, she said then, pleasantly, to the dark ahead of her. I can see that you are not, which is a relief, because I have no patience to spare for fools and a very great deal of affection to spend on a sensible girl who can be brought to see her own interest. So I shall be plain with you, as one sensible creature to another, and we need never have this conversation again. I should like that, ma'am, Rosalind said. Plainness. Good. They reached the landing, and Lady Otterline turned, and the candle light pooled gold in the hollow of her throat. My nephew is the most respected man in 3 counties, and the loneliest. Do you know why he is respected, Miss Carew? Because within my own memory this family was a byword. His father, my own brother, God assoil him, sat at green tables until the land cried out, and laughed in ballrooms while the duns sat in his hall, and let the whole county watch him feel every passion a man can feel, openly, like a dog in the street. It took Julian 17 years to make the name clean again. 17 years of being cold where his father was warm, of wanting nothing where his father wanted everything. She paused. And you propose to undo it in a single summer. I propose nothing, ma'am. You propose with every breath you draw in his direction. I watched you for 30 seconds, and I have the whole of it. The voice did not rise. It never rose. That was the horror of it. Hear me, child. If he marries a penniless girl he took in out of pity, with her father 3 months in the ground, and no fortune and no name the world has heard of, they will say the old blood has come out in him at last. They will say a Wexford has thrown his consequence away on a pretty face, exactly as his father did. Every door I have spent 30 years prizing open will close, and it will close on him, and he will let it, because he loves you, and a man in love is a man with no judgment at all. She drew breath. I do not say this to wound you. I say it because it is true, and because you, unlike him, are still able to act upon the truth. The candle guttered in a draught from the open window. Down in the dark park an owl called, and was answered, and the silence after it was very large. You wish me to marry Mr. Stanhope, Rosalind said. I wish you to be happy and safe and 4,000 a year, which in my experience are very nearly the same thing. Lady Otterline smiled and reached out, and to Rosalind's astonishment tucked a fallen strand of her hair back behind her ear, the gesture of an aunt, of a mother, gentle as anything. You have a kind heart, I think, under the recklessness. Ask it what it wants for him. Not for you, for him. Whether you want to be the thing the county whispers about across his dinner table for the rest of his life. Sleep on it. Good night, Miss Carew. I am so very glad we understand one another. She took her candle and her plum cloak and her perfect composure away down the corridor, and Rosalind stood in the sudden dark with her own small light shaking in her hand, and found that the worst of it, the truly unforgivable, unanswerable worst of it, was that every word the woman had said was true. She slept badly, and woke to a blaze of summer through the unshuttered window, the lawns below already shimmering with heat, the gardeners out with their barrows in the long blue shadows of the limes. She dressed in the grey. 3 months still owed it, and she would not give Lady Otterline the satisfaction of a coloured gown, and went down, and the dowager caught her in the morning room before she had reached the chocolate. So, said the old woman, without looking up from her chocolate cup, my daughter has descended a day early, like a frost in June, and the kitchen is in an uproar, and the second footman has given notice twice before breakfast. She set the cup down. Sit. You have the face of a girl who has been administered the truth in the dark on a staircase. It is Otterline's favourite physic. She keeps it where another woman keeps her smelling salts. She was very kind to me, Rosalind said, and heard how thin it came out. She is always very kind to people she intends to remove. It is one of her economies. Kindness costs her nothing, and saves her the trouble of a quarrel. The dowager's grey eyes, the Duke's eyes, fixed on her. What did she tell you, child? The bit about the family being a byword, and Julian's 17 years making it clean? Yes, I can see she did. It is even true, which is what makes it so serviceable a weapon. She leaves out only one thing. What thing? That she has spent those same 17 years finding my grandson a wife. The old woman lifted her netting and did not net. An heiress, of course. There is always an heiress. This season's is a Miss Aldous, £40,000, a squint and a father in sugar, who would give half the West Indies to call a duke his son. Otterline has all but signed the articles in her own head, and then her nephew's man of business writes to her that the duke has been seen walking in his own rose garden with a penniless girl, and looking at her, and she puts down her embroidery and orders the horses. The dowager looked up. You did not merely tell my grandson you wanted him, Miss Carew. You stood between Otterline Carew and £40,000. She would have been gentler with you if you had set fire to the muniment room. Rosalind sat down rather suddenly on the window seat. Outside, a thrush was going through its whole repertoire in the wisteria, over and over, indecently cheerful. Then I have made it impossible, she said. She is right. If he marries me, they will say a great many things. They always do. It is what they are for. The dowager's voice sharpened. Now attend to me, because I shall not say it twice, and Otterline will say the opposite all week. My son was not undone because he felt things. Half the county feels things, the other half pretends not to and is the worse for it. My son was undone because he was weak and faithless, and could not be trusted with a guinea or a promise. That is not the same as warmth, whatever Otterline has taught the boy to believe, and the cruelest thing she ever did to him was to let him grow up thinking the two were one. A thread pulled taut between her fingers and snapped. Julian is the most faithful creature God ever made, and he is half convinced his own heart is a loaded pistol because his aunt has spent 30 years telling him so. Now go and eat something. Stanhope and his mamma are upon us this afternoon, and you will need your strength to be charming, which I still recommend, and which will now serve a double purpose. Which is, the old woman smiled, and for a moment the resemblance to her grandson was painful. It will tell me whether Julian can bear it. Watching you be charming to a turnip. I have a small wager with myself. Go, Mr. Stanhope and his mother arrived at 4, in a barouche with a great deal of luggage and a small pink dog, and Rosalind, watching from the morning room window, understood within 10 seconds of his handing his mamma down that the dowager had been precisely just to him. He was perhaps 30, fair, pleasant-faced, beautifully made by his tailor and his maker both, and he looked up at the great honey-coloured front of Wexford with the open, unguarded admiration of a man who has never once in his life been laughed at and does not know that it can be done. There, murmured the dowager at her shoulder. Is he not exactly a blankmange? One almost wishes to put a spoon in him. Hush, ma'am, the window is open. He cannot hear me. He is too busy counting the chimneys. He has got to 19, and is very happy. Rosalind pressed 2 fingers hard to her own mouth to stop it, and went down to be presented. He was, she found, impossible to dislike, which was its own kind of cruelty. Mr. Stanhope shook her hand warmly, and said he had heard a great deal of her, all of it good, and he hoped she was fond of riding, because the country hereabouts was famous for it, and he was sorry, very sorry, for her recent loss, and said so simply and without performance, so that she liked him for it, and hated the whole arrangement more. His mother was a small upholstered woman, who approved of everything, and said so continuously. The pink dog made water on the marble, and was forgiven instantly by everyone but the under-butler. The Duke received them in the great hall, with his coldest, most perfect courtesy, the courtesy he had once turned on managing mammas across a ballroom, and Rosalind, standing where she had been placed at Lady Otterline's smooth direction, saw that he had armoured himself for this, and that the armour was excellent, and that it was, all the same, costing him something behind the eyes. Wexford, said Mr. Stanhope, pumping his hand. Devilish good of you to have us. I say, is that a Stubbs in the hall? My uncle has a Stubbs. Not so fine as that one. Nothing like. My grandfather bought it, the Duke said, to settle a debt of honour. It is the only profitable thing he ever did at a card table, and he did it by losing. Rosalind's head came round before she could stop it. It was so dry, so swift, so unlike the level public voice, gone almost before she heard it, the smallest seam of a man split open under the armour, that she laughed, one startled note, entirely without meaning to, and clapped her glove over it at once. But it was too late. The Duke had heard her. For half a heartbeat his eyes came to hers across the cool stone hall, and there was something in them she had last seen by firelight, there, and then mastered, and put away, and Mr. Stanhope laughed his open, generous laugh, and said, Ha! Very good. Very good. Lost it by winning. Ha! And the moment closed over like water. But Lady Otterline had seen it. Rosalind knew she had, because the frost turned that beautiful golden face toward her, and the kindness in it deepened by exactly 1 degree. The way a winter sky deepens before it gives down snow. Dinner that night was everything the night before had not been. The Duke present at the head of his own table, every candle in the house ablaze, the long room glittering, the talk kept aloft by Lady Otterline's beautiful, indefatigable management. Rosalind had been seated beside Mr. Stanhope, of course. She was charming to him. She asked him about Hampshire and his horses, and his agreeable mother, and the small pink dog, whose name was Cleopatra, and he answered all of it with such pleasure that she could have wept, and she did not once look down the table to where the Duke sat carving and saying little, except that she felt every inch of the knot looking like a wire drawn tight between her shoulder blades. You are kind to take such an interest, Miss Carew, Mr. Stanhope said, glowing. I had been warned that town misses found the country dull. You do not find it dull, I think. I find very little dull, sir, if I am honest. It is one of my failings. I cannot think it a failing." He smiled at her. "I think a man might do a great deal worse than a wife who is never bored. He might do a great deal worse altogether than, well," he coloured, and applied himself to his fish. And Rosalind became aware that the conversation at her own end of the table had been steered, gently, by an aunt's invisible hand, toward exactly this declaration, and that the whole bright room had been arranged around the slow public engineering of her future, and that the Duke at the head of it had handed her the salt, and the fish, and the wine, and his own silence, course after course, and meant to go on handing them to her down the length of all the years to come. She set down her fork. The candle flames swam. "You must forgive me," she said. The heat, and the dowager, magnificent, took it up at once with a complaint about the climate of the dining room that her late husband had built wrong out of spite, and the moment passed, and no one but 2 old women and 1 young one knew that anything had broken in it at all. It was after the gentleman rejoined them, in the long drawing room with the windows thrown open to the warm, scented dark, that Rosalind heard the thing she was not meant to hear. She had gone to the far casement for air, half hidden by the fall of a curtain, while at the pianoforte, Mr. Stanhope's mother coaxed a sentimental air out of the keys, and Cleopatra slept in a satin heap. And on the terrace just below the open window, 2 voices had stopped to take the cool, the Duke's, low and clipped, and his aunt's, smooth as cream. "Cannot pretend not to understand me, Julian. I have eyes. The girl is charming, and you are not made of stone, whatever the county believes. I ask only what you mean to do about it. I mean to see her well married, as I promised her father, with a settlement of £8,000. Lady Otterline's voice did not change. "Yes, Stanhope's man let it fall to mine this afternoon, doubtless thinking I knew. £8,000, Julian, on a girl with not 8 shillings of her own, settled quietly, out of your own purse, with her name kept off the deed, so that the world will think it her father's portion. A handsome price." A pause, and Rosalind's blood went to water in her veins. "Tell me, is it her dowry you are paying, or your own conscience?" The silence on the terrace went on a long time. The pianoforte tinkled. Rosalind stood pressed to the curtain with her heart slamming, and the whole bright evening collapsing into a single cold fact, that he had bought her a husband. That while she had been pouring out her heart in the rose walk and laying his coat across his shoulders in the firelight, he had been quietly, kindly, irrevocably purchasing her exit, £8,000 to set her into Stanhope's good safe hands and close the door. "Some man will be lucky to have you," he had said. He had made certain of the luck himself, in pounds sterling, with her name kept off the page so that she need never know she had been so neatly handed on. "Her father trusted me," the Duke said at last, very low. "I will see her provided for. That is the whole of it." "Of course it is," said Lady Otterline. "It always is. Good night, my dear. You are a very good man." Rosalind drew back from the window before she could hear his answer, if he made one. The room swam, the candles, the satin dog, Mr. Stanhope rising with his open, hopeful face to ask whether she cared to turn the music. And through all of it ran the one thing she could not unhear, beating in time with the pianoforte and her own pulse, £8,000, her name kept off the deed, so that the world would think it her father's, so that she would think it her father's. "Miss Carew?" Mr. Stanhope was beside her, anxious, kind. "You are pale. Shall I fetch your maid?" "No," she made herself smile, the charm coming up over the wound like a glove drawn on. "No, you are very good. I find I am tired, that is all. It has been a long day." Across the room, the dowager's grey eyes found her, and narrowed, reading something. Not yet the whole of it. By the door, Lady Otterline came back in from the terrace alone, unhurried, triumphant, lovely as the frost. And behind her, through the open casement, the night stocks poured their sweetness into the room, as though nothing in the world had changed. "Good night, Mr. Stanhope," Rosalind said. "I am sure I shall be quite myself by morning." She was not at all sure of it. But she had learned, that summer, exactly where to keep her hands. Sleep would not come, and at the grey edge of the morning she gave up the pretense of it. The house lay in the hush before the maids were stirring, the corridors blue and dim, the long windows giving onto a park still drowned in mist. Rosalind dressed herself without ringing. She had dressed herself for 22 years, and saw no cause to wake a girl to fasten what her own fingers knew, and went down by the cold back stairs in her stocking feet with her shoes in her hand, because she had remembered, lying awake through the short summer night, the one fact about the Duke of Wexford that the whole household took for granted and never named, that he rode out before any other soul was up. The stable yard smelled of warm horse and crushed straw and the iron of the pump, and the cobbles had not yet lost their night cool to the day's coming blaze. A boy was leading out the big grey hunter, and the Duke stood by its shoulder in his riding coat, with one gloved hand on the animal's neck, bareheaded, the early sun just touching the top of the wall behind him, and gilding nothing yet. He heard her step on the stone, and went still, the way he had gone still in the rose walk, and she saw him decide, in the space of a breath, to be level about it. "Miss Carew, you are abroad early. £8,000, she said. The boy looked up. The Duke did not. He drew off his glove, finger by finger, and gave it to the lad with a word too low for her to catch, and the boy took the grey away through the arch, hooves ringing. And then there was only the pump dripping, and a pigeon muttering in the eaves, and the two of them in the cold gold yard. "You were at the terrace window," he said. "I was at the terrace window. You bought me a husband, Your Grace, and you kept my name off the deed so that I should pour out my thanks at my dear dead father's portion, and never know I had been so neatly handed on." Her voice was perfectly steady, which frightened her more than shaking would have. "Tell me I have it wrong. I am begging you. Tell me my aunt that isn't invented it to wound me, and I will go in and never speak of it again." "You have it wrong," he said, "in the particulars. Then correct the particulars." "It is not a price." He took a step toward her and stopped, as though the cobbles between them were the arm's length he had held her at in the library. "Your father had £8,000 and lost the most of it to a bad partner in a shipping venture the year before his health broke. I made it good. That is all. It is the portion he would have settled on you himself had the world used him better, and I have arranged that you receive it as his, because a girl ought to go to her marriage on her own father's money, and not on the charity of the man who failed to save him." It was so reasonable, and so kind, and so entirely a lie of omission, that she felt the whole of it close over her head, like the mill pond. "And the keeping of my name off the deed? So that you should never feel what you are feeling now. Which is what, Your Grace? Name it." Beholden, his jaw moved. "I did not wish you to look at me across a dinner table for the rest of your life and see your creditor. I would rather you thought ill of me for coldness than well of me for that." She had not known, until this moment, that a man could break her heart by being good. "You decided," she said slowly. "Every part of it. My money. My husband. What I should be permitted to know, and what I should be spared. You arranged my whole future down to the last guinea while I was upstairs deciding whether I dared love you, and you did it gently, and you did it generously, and you did not once think to ask me." The mist was burning off the lawns beyond the arch. A blackbird had begun, somewhere, the same indecent music as before. "That is not protection, Julian. That is the cut direct, dressed up in a settlement so that I cannot even be angry without looking like an ingrate." For one moment something flared in his face. The firelit man, the one whose pulse she had felt going like a bird's against her thumb, and she thought he would say it. The thing the dowager had promised would keep him awake. Then he reached for the level voice, and found it, and it was the worst thing he had ever done to her. "You will be very happy with Mr. Stanhope," he said. "Yes," she answered. "I expect I shall. He, at least, would never dream of arranging my life without consulting me. He has not the imagination. She put on her shoes there in the yard, one and then the other, balancing with a hand against the cold wall, while he stood and watched her do it and did not offer his arm. I came down to give you the chance to deny it. You have declined the chance very handsomely. Good night, Your Grace. Good morning. I find I never know which, with you. She walked back across the cobbles with her spine straight and her hands quite still, and behind her she heard him say her name once. Lo, Rosalind. And she did not turn, because if she turned she would run to him, and she had run to him once already this week, and he had answered it with a banker's draught. The dowager was awake when Rosalind came in, though it wanted an hour of her usual rising. Propped against her pillows in a vast lace cap, a candle still burning needlessly in the strengthening light, and a face that said she had heard the stable yard or smelt the weather of it. You have the look, the old woman said, of a girl who has had a sum of money explained to her. Sit on the end of the bed. I cannot abide people who loom. Was it 8,000, or has she got the figure up to 10 by now? Ottoline always rounds upward when she is enjoying herself. You knew. Rosalind sat. The coverlet was cool damask under her hand. You knew he had settled it, and you let me walk into dinner. I knew my grandson had quietly made your father's bad luck good, which is the single most characteristic thing he has done in his life, and I did not tell you, because it was not mine to tell, and because I wished to see whether he would have the courage to do it openly, or the cowardice to do it behind your back. She reached for her barley water, grimaced, drank it anyway. He chose the cowardice. I am disappointed in him and not in the least surprised. Now, what did you say to him, with your face doing what it is doing? I told him it was the cut direct in a settlement's clothing. Rosalind heard her own voice waver for the first time. And then I told him I should be very happy with Mr. Stanhope. The dowager set down the glass with a click. And do you mean to be? I mean to stop making them both wretched, ma'am. I mean to stop being the thing the county will whisper about over his dinner table for 30 years. Your Ottoline was right about that, even if she was cruel in the saying of it. He has restored this name with 17 years of his life, and I will not be the pretty face that throws it back into the gutter, however much she stopped. The cap strings trembled at the edge of her sight. I am going to accept him. Mr. Stanhope, when he asks. He is good and kind, and he will let me read at breakfast and ride in the afternoon, and he will never once decide my life without me, because he hasn't the wit to manage it. That is a great deal more than most women get. I should be grateful. You keep using that word, said the dowager, as though it were a kind of laudanum. Her grey eyes, his eyes, were unbearably gentle, which from her was nearly unendurable. Gratitude, it is what people reach for when they have given up the right to want. My dear child, you came into this house 6 weeks ago and made my impossible grandson leave a fire lit in June because you felt the damp, and now you propose to spend your one life with a turnip because 2 old women frightened you on a staircase, and you call it grace. It is not grace. It is surrender with its hair done nicely. She lay back. But I will not stop you. I have learnt that much in 70 years. Go and be charming to your blancmange. Only, Rosalind, the Christian name, for the first time. When you find you cannot do it after all, come and tell me before you do anything Ottoline can use. Promise me that, and you may surrender all you like. The day came on hot and cloudless and merciless, the sky a hard enamel blue over the shimmering lawns, and Mr. Stanhope was at the breakfast-room door by 10, with a small pink dog under his arm, and a face full of plans. Would Miss Carew care to see the famous prospect from the hill walk? His mother had pronounced herself prostrated by the heat, and would keep to the morning-room. The Duke was shut up with his man of affairs. Lady Ottoline had letters. And so it fell out, as everything that week fell out, exactly as it had been arranged to fall, that Rosalind should walk alone with Mr. Stanhope through the long gardens in the blaze of noon, with no one to chaperone them but Cleopatra, who chaperoned nobody, and chased a cabbage white into the lavender within the first minute. I hope you do not mind the heat, he said, holding back a trailing rope of roses so that she might pass under the arch without catching her sleeve. I find I am always happier out of doors. My mother says it is low of me. I say a man was given legs for a reason, and it was not the drawing room. I am entirely of your opinion, sir, and she was, which was the misery of it. He was easy to walk beside. He told her about Hampshire, the chalk streams, the church his great-grandfather had built, the way the beaches turned in October, and he asked her questions and listened to the answers. His fair, pleasant face turned to her with an attention so open and so undemanding that she could have laid her whole bruised heart in his hands, and he would have held it carefully, and never once understood what he held. "You are kinder than they told me town misses were," he said, when they reached the top of the hill walk, where the whole honey-coloured front of Wexford lay spread below them in the heat haze, with its 200 windows burning. "There. Is that not a thing worth the climb? It is very beautiful." The cut delphiniums in the borders far below made a blue smear against the gold. Somewhere down there a window stood open on a man bent over a ledger he was using. She had no doubt, to escape her still. Miss Carew. Mr. Stanhope had taken off his hat and was turning it in his hands, and had gone a fine clear pink to the ears. I am not a clever man. I know it. My mother reminds me. I have made my peace with it. But I know my own mind, and I have known it since Tuesday, and I think, I hope, that you cannot have failed to see. Mr. Stanhope. Her heart was going very fast. "Now," said the cold, sensible voice that had kept her alive through poverty and nursing and grief. "Now. And it is done, and he is safe, and you are safe, and the name is safe. Do not say it on a hilltop in this heat. I beg you. You will regret the staging. Ask me somewhere with a chair." He laughed, his open, generous, grateful laugh, and put his hat back on. "There," he said, delighted, "you see. You are clever enough for both of us. A chair, of course. This evening, then, I shall ask you this evening, very properly, and you may have a chair and your colour and your fan, and I shall not bungle it." He offered his arm, and she took it, and they went down the hill together into the heat, and she had bought herself, with one light clever sentence, exactly 9 hours. She did not get to keep the 9 hours undisturbed. Lady Otterline found her at 4, in the cool of the long gallery, where Rosalind had gone to be alone with the dead, and gone Wexfords, and could not even have that, because the older woman came drifting down the line of frames, in a gown of pale dove-grey silk, morning's near cousin, chosen. Rosalind understood at once, as a quiet rebuke to her own 3 months of honest black, with a folded letter in her ringed hand and the kind, terrible warmth already lit behind her eyes. "There you are. I have been hoping to catch you private. Walk with me. These are my family. I may abuse them to you freely. That one gamed away a Hampshire living. That one married an actress, and was forgiven because she was rich. We are not, whatever the world now believes, a respectable house. We are merely a house that has learned to look respectable, which is a far rarer and more valuable thing." She stopped before the portrait of a cold-faced man in the last rain's dress. Julian's father. My brother. Painted the year before the green tables took him in earnest. Look at the mouth. He could not be told. No one could ever tell him anything. He felt too much and listened to nothing, and he brought 400 years down about our ears in a single decade of feeling things openly. She turned. "I am told you walked out with Mr. Stanhope this morning." "I did, ma'am, and found him agreeable. Very agreeable. I am so glad." Lady Otterline tapped the folded letter against her gloved palm, once, twice, and Rosalind's eye went to it before she could stop herself, and the older woman saw it go, and smiled. "You are wondering what I hold. I shall tell you. I have no taste for mysteries. They are vulgar. It is from my correspondent in town, and it concerns a Miss Aldous. £40,000. A father in the sugar trade who would pave Wexford's avenue in guineas to call my nephew his son. And an understanding, not yet articles, but very near it, that Julian himself authorized me to pursue last spring, before a certain penniless young woman came down from Bath and made him forget that a duke marries for his house and not his heart. She unfolded the letter, unhurried, and held it where Rosalind could see the close-looped hand, but not quite read it. Her people come north in September. Julian knows. He agreed to receive her. He has not withdrawn his agreement, my dear. For all the lit fires and the rose walks, he has not written one line to withdraw it. And do you know why? Because in the part of him that governs, the part that has kept this family afloat for 17 years, he knows exactly what he must do, and he is only waiting, like the good man he is, until you are safely settled where your settlement has settled you, to do it. The gallery was very still. Outside, the heat lay on the park like a hand. Rosalind looked at the letter, and at the kind, cruel, beautiful face above it, and felt the last of her own certainty go out of her like water out of a cracked jug. "Why are you telling me this?" she said. "If it is all arranged, why trouble to tell me at all?" "Because I do not enjoy cruelty, whatever you imagine, and it would be cruel to let you go on hoping. You are going to accept Mr. Stanhope tonight." It was not a question. "I know it. The Dowager knows it. You have as good as told the man so on a hilltop. And I wished only that you should do it with your eyes open, knowing that in choosing him you are not losing Julian. Because Julian was never, in any world that has bankers and articles and a House of Lords in it, yours to lose. You are merely freeing him to do the thing he had already decided upon, before he ever met you." There, she refolded the letter and slid it into her reticule. "Now it is said, and you may be happy, and I shall write to my correspondent that the way is clear. You have a kind heart, Miss Carew. I told you so on the stair. Spend it on a man who can keep it." She drifted away down the gallery, her grey silk whispering on the old boards, and Rosalind stood beneath the cold mouth of the painted man who could not be told, and discovered that the worst pain was not the heiress, nor the 40,000, nor even the September. It was the one word the woman had let fall like a glove, authorized. He had set his aunt to find him a fortune to marry, with his own consent, in the spring, and had never written the single line that would call her off. Whatever passed in the rose walk, whatever passed by the fire, he had left the other door standing open the whole time. She went to find him. She told herself she was not going to find him. She told herself she was going to the library only for the book he had said she might keep, the book that had been the flimsy reason for everything, and her feet carried her along the hot corridors with the sun pouring through the tall windows and the dust hanging gold in it, and she opened the library door without knocking, and he was there. Of course, he was there, standing at the long window with a paper in his hand and his back to the room, and he turned, and for one unguarded instant his whole face opened to her before the governance came down. "Is it true," she said, "that you set your aunt to find you an heiress last spring, and that you have never written to stop her?" He did not pretend not to understand. She would give him that, always. He never once pretended not to understand. "It is true that I authorized the acquaintance. It is true that I have not formally withdrawn it. In the spring. Before you, and you have lain awake every night this week, by the Dowager's account and my own eyes, and not found 9 minutes in any of them to write 4 lines to a sugar merchant's lawyer to say the Duke regrets he is no longer in the market." She came toward him across the long room, and the heat of the day stood in it like water, and the smell of the night stocks below the window was beginning, even in the afternoon, to climb the wall. "Why, Julian? You who arrange everything, my money, my husband, my whole life to the last guinea, why have you left that one door standing open?" "Because a man should keep his options against his own folly," he said, and the level voice cracked across the middle of it like ice on a pond. "Because I do not trust myself, in this room, with you, to make a single decision that is not the ruin of everything 4 generations bled for. Because if I write that letter, I have nothing left between me and the thing I want but my own honor, and my own honor, Rosalind, has been the only reliable servant I have ever kept. His hand had closed white-knuckled on the window frame. I left the door open because I am a coward, exactly as you told me in the Rose Walk. You see, I am consistent. Then close it now. She was an arm's length from him. She could see the pulse in his bare throat, the same pulse, going hard. Write the letter now, this minute, in front of me, and I will not marry Mr. Stanhope, and we will face the whole county together and let them whisper themselves hoarse. Or do not write it, leave it open, and I will go down tonight and accept a good kind man who deserves better than a woman who is in love with you. And you may marry your 40,000 in September, and we will both of us be exactly as respectable and exactly as alone as your aunt requires. Those are the 2 doors, Julian. I am done being walked between them like the salt. Choose one. In front of me. Now. The clock on the chimney-piece ticked. The sun blazed in the tall window. He looked at her with his whole face, wanting, terror, 17 years of caution, and 1 summer of fire, all at war behind his eyes, and his hand came up from the window frame, and for the length of 1 breath she thought he would reach for her, and she thought he would reach for the pen. He reached for neither. I cannot ask you to share what I am, he said. I am not the bargain you think me. Marry Stanhope. Be happy. Let me give you that one thing without ruining it, since it is the only thing I have ever been able to give anyone. You have not given it to me, she said. You have taken it from me, and handed me a substitute, and called it a gift. And because she would not, in this room, let him see her break, because she had learned that summer exactly where to keep her hands, she dropped him the smallest, most perfect curtsy of her life, the curtsy of a parson's orphan to the 5th Duke of Wexford, and walked out, and left him standing in the heat with the door behind her standing open, since he was so very fond of open doors. She accepted Mr. Stanhope at 9:30 that evening, in the small saloon, in a chair, with her colour and her fan exactly as promised. He did it beautifully. The poor good man, he had clearly rehearsed it, and he stumbled over none of it. And he went down on 1 knee on the Turkey carpet, with Cleopatra watching from the sofa, and said that he had never in his life been so sure of anything, that he knew he was not clever, but he knew his own heart, that he would spend the whole of his on making her glad she had said yes. And Rosalind looked at his open, hopeful, upturned face in the candlelight, and thought of a man bent over a ledger in the next wing, rather than write 4 lines that would have saved them both. And she put her hand into Mr. Stanhope's warm one, and said, "Yes. Thank you. Yes," and watched his whole face light like a window at Christmas, and felt nothing at all but a great cold quiet, like the marble hall in February. "You have made me the happiest man in England," he said. "I am very glad," she said, and meant the kindness in it, if nothing else. The door opened. She knew before she turned, by the change in the air, by the small sound Cleopatra made, and when she turned it was the Duke who stood there. Come, she understood at once, on some innocent errand of hostship, to ask whether they wanted the lamps trimmed, or the carriage ordered for the morning. The Duke of Wexford, in his evening black, framed in his own doorway, looking at the parson's orphan with her hand in Mr. Stanhope's, and the ring of the moment still hanging in the air between them all. "Wexford," cried Mr. Stanhope, springing up, radiant, both hands out. "You are the very man. You shall be the first to wish us joy. Miss Carew has done me the very great honour, and Rosalind, her hand still warm and dreadful in her betrothed's, watched the Duke of Wexford's level public face take the blow she had aimed at his own heart, and hold, and not break, and begin, with a courtesy so perfect it was its own kind of violence, to cross the room toward them with his hand held out to wish her joy. His hand reached them before his face had finished its composing. The Duke of Wexford crossed his own small saloon with the candlelight sliding along his black sleeve, and his palm came out flat and steady, and Mr. Stanhope seized it in both his own and shook it as though he meant to draw water. "Wexford, you are too good. Say you wish us joy. Say it. I shall not believe it is real until a duke has said so. I wish you," the duke said. The word stopped. Rosalind had her hand still folded in Mr. Stanhope's warm one, and she felt the catch of it across the whole room, the half-inch where the level voice ran out of road. Julian Ashcombe looked at her over her betrothed's bright shoulder, and for the space of a single guttering candle, she watched a man try to lift something that had finally, after 17 years, grown too heavy to lift in company. "Happiness," he finished, "that the word will hold." It was beautifully done. Mr. Stanhope heard only the blessing, and not the crack beneath it. He laughed his open laugh, and pumped the hand again, and turned to tell Cleopatra, who had risen on the sofa to investigate the excitement, that she should have a blue ribbon for the wedding. But the Duke had not let go of Rosalind's gaze, and as he drew his hand back from Stanhope's, he let it pass, for the briefest moment, close to hers, not touching, a half-inch of warm air between his knuckles and her glove, and he said, so low that only she could have caught it under the spaniel's scrabbling and the candle's hiss, "Forgive me. I find I cannot do this part well after all." Then he bowed to the room entire, host to guests, and said in his ordinary voice that the night was warm and he would see the windows opened, and went out, and the door drew shut behind him with the soft, expensive click of a house where the hinges are never permitted to complain. "What a very great man he is," said Mr. Stanhope, glowing, "and what a thing to have his blessing. Miss Carew, Rosalind, may I? You have gone quite pale again. It is the heat, I am sure. Shall I open the—" "You are kindness itself," she said, and heard her own voice come out smooth and finished and false, the charm drawn on over the wound like a glove. "Forgive me. I should like a little air, and then I should like to sit with the dowager a while, if you will spare me. An old woman who has been promised a granddaughter has a claim on the evening of a betrothal." Of course you must. I would not for the world." He kissed her hand. His mouth was warm and dry, and meant nothing but goodness. "Tomorrow," he said, "I shall write to my mother in proper form, and to my own people in Hampshire, and we shall begin. I am the happiest man in England." I keep saying it. I cannot find another sentence. "You will not need one," she told him gently. "It is the right sentence. Keep it." She went out into the corridor, where the heat of the long day still stood pooled under the high ceilings, and she put her back against the cool plaster between two windows, and pressed both gloved hands flat to the wall behind her, and for one moment she let the smooth thing slide off her face entirely, alone in the blue dark, with the night stocks pouring up from the garden, and a moth knocking itself stupid against the glass. I cannot do this part well after all. She had aimed the blow at his heart, and he had taken it standing, and the taking of it had told her, more surely than any rose-walk or firelit library, the one thing his whole governed life had been built to keep her from knowing. She had promised the dowager, "Come and tell me before you do anything Ottoline can use." It was a little late for that. But a promise was a promise, and she had nowhere else in the wide hot house to take what she was carrying. She went up by the gallery, because it was the long way, and she wanted the long way. And in the gallery, she stopped. Lady Rosalind Carew stood at the far end of it, beneath the cold-mouthed portrait of the brother she had named a byword, and she did not know she was watched. A single branch of candles burned on the console beside her, and by its light Rosalind saw that the great composed woman held something small in her two hands, tilted to the flame, a miniature, an oval the size of a lady's palm, in a worn gilt case whose hinge she worked open and shut, with her thumb, without seeming to know that her thumb was moving at all. She was looking down into the painted face of it the way a person looks into deep water. Her own face, lit from below, had nothing of the frost in it. It had only the long, plain, unguarded ache of a woman standing in front of the one door that 30 years of management had never once managed to close. Rosalind stood very still in the dark of the doorway. She did not speak. After a moment she stepped back across the threshold, soundless on the old boards, and took the servant's stare instead, and left Lady Otterlyn alone with whatever she had carried north in her reticule, and could not, even now, set down. The Dowager was awake, of course. The Dowager was always awake when she was wanted. "You have done it," the old woman said, before Rosalind had got the door shut. She was sitting up against her pillows with a shawl about her, and the candle burning, and her netting abandoned, and her grey eyes, his eyes, went over the girl's face and read the whole of the evening off it like a bill of lading. "He came in. He wished you joy. And you have come to me with your hands behaving, and your heart in pieces, exactly as I asked you to, which is more than my grandson has ever once managed. Sit, not there. Here." Rosalind sat on the edge of the great bed. "He could not finish it," she said. "The wishing joy. He got to the middle of it, and the road ran out. And then he begged my pardon, and said he could not do the part well, and went out. And I have accepted a good man, whom I shall make wretched. And I do not know what I am to do, ma'am. I do not know how to undo a thing I have done so very thoroughly. Stop." The Dowager's hand closed over hers, dry and light and astonishingly strong. "You will not undo anything tonight. Tonight you will read something, and then you will sleep, and tomorrow we will be cleverer than Otterline. Which is not difficult if one is willing to be honest. A weapon she has never once thought to keep about her." She reached to the small table at her bedside, where her barley water stood untouched and a flat packet of letters lay tied in faded tape, and she drew the topmost one free and held it out. The paper was thin, much folded, the direction in a hand gone shaky at the end of a long illness. "Your father wrote to my grandson twice. The first was the letter of introduction you never needed. This is the second. Julian gave it to me in May, the week you came, because he could not keep it in the house with him and could not put it in the fire. Read it. He has never known I kept it. Read the part I have turned down for you." Rosalind's fingers were not quite steady on the fold. The candle threw the words up at her, the dear failing hand she had watched grow weaker week by week through the winter, and she read where the page was creased. "So I do not send her to you to be disposed of, Wexford, whatever you tell yourself you are about. I have watched you these years be cold in public and warm in every place the world forgot to look, and I know precisely what you are, which is the one thing your aunt has spent a lifetime persuading you that you are not. Do not see my Rosalind safely married. Any fool with a settlement can do as much. And I have seen what safety does to a spirited girl. It is a slow business, and there is no marker over the grave of it. See her happy. And if you cannot find the man worthy of her, look nearer than you think to look, and ask yourself whether the failure is in her, or in your own determination not to be seen wanting anything that the county might one day talk about over its dinner. You owe me one honest answer to that question. I am calling it in now. While I still can." The letter shook in her hand. Below, very faint, the stable clock told the hour into the warm dark, and a nightjar chirred once in the limes, and went silent. "He has had this since May," Rosalind whispered. "Since before I came down the steps of his carriage. Look nearer than you think to look." My father all but put my hand in his. "Your father," said the Dowager, "was a great deal cleverer than a parson's living gave him room to be, and he knew my grandson for what he was after one afternoon's acquaintance, which is more than Otterline has troubled to know in 30 years of raising him." The old woman folded the girl's fingers back over the page. "Julian did not lie to you, child. He never lies. It is one of his few inconveniences. He told you he made your father a promise. He simply chose, every day since May, to keep the easy half of it, and to call that honor. See her well married. Those were never your father's words. They were Julian's, put into your father's mouth, because they were the only half of the promise he had the courage to keep." She lay back against the lace. "Now you have the truth in your two hands. The question is no longer what he feels. We have all of us known that since the Rose Walk. But whether he can be made to choose it in front of the county, his aunt, and his own 400 years, before you marry a turnip out of a misplaced sense of grace. And that, my dear, you will not settle by weeping on my counterpane. Keep the letter, sleep, and in the morning be braver than he is, which you have already proved twice this week that you are. She did sleep in the end, with her father's words under her pillow and her own answered at last, and she woke to the great hot blue of another cloudless morning, with the resolve already made, hard and clean, and quite without fear, the way a thing is made in the dark, while the rest of one is busy elsewhere. She did not reach the Duke. Lady Otterline reached her first. The older woman was waiting in the small breakfast parlour, where Rosalind took her chocolate, seated very upright in the morning light, with the frost back in its place, and not a trace upon her of the woman who had stood in the gallery, turning a gilt hinge open and shut. A folded sheet lay beneath her ringed hand on the cloth. Her dove-grey silk was immaculate. She had been beautiful, Rosalind thought, since before either of them was born, and she would be beautiful long after, and she had learnt to use it as another woman learns to use a key. "Sit," said Lady Otterline pleasantly. "Pour yourself something. You have the look of a girl who has been reading her correspondence in the small hours, which is a habit I should break you of, were we to be longer acquainted. But we are not, so I shall merely observe it. I have been to the village this morning already. The post goes south at noon. Has it gone, ma'am?" "My letter to my correspondent has not." She turned the folded sheet a quarter turn beneath her hand, the way a card player squares a trick. "I had thought to send word that the way to Miss Aldous was clear, now that you are settled. I find I am holding it back an hour, out of fairness to you, because I begin to suspect you mean to do something foolish, and I should rather frighten you out of it over chocolate than be obliged to repair it over a scandal." The voice did not rise. It never rose. "You have a letter of your own, I think. Your father's. The old woman has been hoarding it. She hoards everything. It is the only appetite age has left her. Whatever it says, my dear, burn it. Letters from the departed are the most dangerous things in any house, because they cannot be cross-examined, and they tell us only what we wish to hear from the people we most wish to please. It tells me," Rosalind said quietly, "that my father did not send me here to be disposed of, and that he asked your nephew one honest question, and is owed one honest answer. For the first time since the library doorway, something moved behind the frost, quick, and at once put away. Your father, Lady Otterline said, was a sick man, writing in the dark, and the dying are romantics to a fault. It is the one luxury we permit them." She rose, the silk whispering, and the folded letter stayed pinned beneath 2 fingers on the cloth. "Hear me, since you will not be frightened by hints. If you cry off from Mr. Stanhope and let my nephew make a duchess of a portionless girl with her father 3 months unburied, you will not be punished for it. That is the cruelty of it. Child, there is no one to punish you. You will simply be the reason. For 30 years, every door that has opened to this family has opened a little wider. From the day of that wedding they will begin, very quietly, to swing the other way. And he will tell you it does not signify, and he will mean it, and you will both believe it, for a year, perhaps 2. And then one evening you will watch a woman you wish to call on look through you across a room as though you were a window, and you will know that you did that to him. You, with your kind heart and your father's romantic letter, and there will be no taking it back." She drew breath. "I do not say this to wound you. I have never once said anything to wound you. I say it because it is true." The chocolate cooled in its cup. A wasp came in at the open window, considered the marmalade, and droned out again into the heat. Rosalind stood and found that her hands were perfectly still, and that the stillness was no longer something she had to keep. It was simply hers. "You are right in every particular, ma'am," she said. "It is the cruelest thing about you, that you are always right in every particular, and always leave out the one thing that would unmake the sum. You have told me what it will cost him to marry me. You have not once asked what it costs him not to. You watched him grow up, and you taught him that warmth was the thing that brought this house down. And you were wrong. It was weakness brought it down, and faithlessness, and a man who could not keep a promise or a guinea. My father kept both till the last hour I had him. Your nephew has kept every promise but the true half of one, and he has kept the false half of it so well that it is putting out the light in him by inches. Where no one is permitted to look, I have seen what safety does to a spirited girl. My father wrote that. I should rather be the reason a door swings shut than the reason a good man spends 40 years alone in a house with 200 windows and no one behind any of them. Lady Ottoline looked at her for a long moment in the hot clear light. Then she gathered her grey silk about her with the unhurried dignity of the genuinely defeated, who never let it show in the room where it is dealt. You are not a fool, she said. I told you so on the stair. I find I am sorrier for it now than I was then. And she went out, and the folded letter went with her, unsent and unsurrendered. And Rosalind understood that the woman had retreated to think, and that thinking, in Lady Rosalind Carew, was the most dangerous and the most hopeful thing she did. The Duke was in the library. He was always, when the world pressed, in the library. She had learned that much of him in 6 weeks, as one learns the habits of a tide. He turned from the long window when she came in, and he had a paper in his hand, and she saw that he had not slept either. The same blue shadow beneath the eyes, the cravat already loosened, though it wanted hours of evening, the broad workman's hand not quite steady on the page. The heat stood in the room like water. Below the open casement the night stocks had not finished their reckless climb, and the smell of them came up sweet and shameless into the morning, out of all season with the bright sober light. You should not be here, he said. You are promised to another man as of last night, and I am the last person in England you ought. My father did not tell you to see me well married, she said. The paper went still in his hand. He told you to see me happy. She crossed the room, no longer keeping any arm's length, and she drew the thin, much-folded letter from her sleeve and held it up between them where the window light fell through it and showed the dear failing hand. He told you to look nearer than you thought to look. He asked you one honest question and said he was calling it in. You have had this since May, Julian, since before I came down the steps of your carriage in the rain. You have carried the true half of his promise about with you for 6 weeks and answered it every single day with the false half, and called the false half honour, and let me believe you were giving me to a stranger out of duty when my own father had as good as given me to you out of love. Her voice did not break. She would not let it. I am not asking what you feel. I am long past that. I am asking the question my father asked, and I am calling it in, as he could not. Is the failure in me, Julian, or in your determination not to be seen wanting anything the county might talk about over its dinner? The clock on the chimney-piece ticked through a silence that seemed to have no flaw to it. And then the Duke of Wexford set down his paper and put both his hands over his face, and when he took them away the level voice was gone. Gone entirely. Not mastered, not put by, simply gone. And what was left was the firelit man, the one whose pulse she had felt going like a bird's against her thumb, unshuttered at last in the broad plain morning. The failure is in me, he said. It has always been in me. Your father knew it in an afternoon, and I have spent 6 weeks proving him right. I have wanted you since the 3rd day, when you told Mrs. Penhallow not to trouble about the fire and felt the damp anyway, and would not say so, and I lit it, and you knew that I had, and neither of us said one word, and I thought, there, that is a thing I may keep, a small warm thing the world will never see, and it will be enough. His hands had come down to grip the back of a chair, white-knuckled, the same grip with which he had once held her at arm's length. It was not enough. It has not been enough for 1 hour since. I told my aunt to find me a fortune to marry, because I could not be trusted, in this room, with what I felt, and I left the door open, because my own honour was the only servant I had ever found reliable, and last night I stood in my own saloon, and tried to wish you joy of another man, and discovered that there is a limit, after all, to what honour will do for me. I have reached it. I reached it at the word happiness. Then close the door, she said. You said you could not, in this room, with me, make a single decision that was not the ruin of everything. Make this one, in front of me. Now, he looked at her. And then he turned and took up the paper he had been holding when she came in, and she saw that it was not an estate paper at all. It was begun, 3 lines, in his own hand, to the offices of Messrs. Holloway and Reed, on behalf of the Wexford interest, and he dipped the pen and finished it standing, fast, the nib biting the page, and read it aloud to her as he wrote, because he had promised her, in this room, that he would do nothing again behind her back. The Duke of Wexford withdraws, finally and without reservation, from any understanding, expressed or implied, touching a match between his house and the family of Aldous. He regrets any inconvenience. He is no longer, and will never again be, in the market. He signed it. The wax he dropped himself, and pressed his signet into it with the heel of his hand. There, it goes south at noon, in front of you, by my own footman, and my aunt may follow it to town and unmake it if she can, but she cannot, because a duke's hand on the wax is the one thing in England even Rosalind Carew cannot manage. He set it down between them on the desk, the seal still soft. It will cost me, Rosalind. Not the money. The estate has not needed the money these 5 years. I told my aunt I would receive the girl, because it was easier than telling her the truth, which is the whole shape of my cowardice in a sentence. It will cost me the county's good opinion, which I have bled for. It will cost me my aunt, who raised me, and who is not wholly wrong, and who will never forgive either of us. And it will cost me the only armour I have ever owned, for if I do this, every soul in 3 counties will know at last that a Wexford wanted something openly, and could not be cold about it, and there will be no taking that back. He came round the desk to her. I have counted the cost since May. I counted it again at 3 this morning. I find it is a price, and I find, God help me, your father saw it before I did, that I have wanted to pay it from the 3rd day. I love you. I have managed every other word in the language, and I cannot manage to keep that one in any longer. I love you, and I am asking, very late and very badly and entirely without a settlement to hide behind. Will you have me, who am the worst marriage in England, and the only one I want to make? The fountain sounded faintly through the open window. A blackbird sang in the limes, the same indecent music as in the rose walk, a lifetime, and 3 days ago. I told you in the garden, she said, and now the steadiness gave way, and she let it, and did not mind, that some man would be lucky. And you told me to be hoped for elsewhere. I was rather hoping for you. I am still rather hoping for you. I have done nothing else all summer. She put her 2 hands into his broad ones over the cooling wax. Yes, yes, Julian, 1,000 times, and never once a gift I did not choose. Yes. He drew her in then. At last, with no arm's length left in him anywhere, and bent his head, and the kiss was nothing like governance. It was the fire lit in June because she had felt the damp, and her hand found the warm pulse at his throat, going hard and quick and human, and at last entirely unhidden, and she thought, with the last clear corner of her mind before thinking stopped, there, that is the answer he owed my father. I shall write and tell him, and remembered, and pressed closer instead, into the living warmth of the man her father had chosen for her, without ever telling either of them, and let the unwritten letter go. There remained the cost, and they paid it that same day, because neither of them would do to Mr. Stanhope by silence what had so nearly been done to Rosalind. She told him herself, in the small saloon, in a chair, with her colour and without her fan. He heard her out with his fair, pleasant face going slowly still, the spaniel asleep on his knee, and when she had finished, he was quiet for a moment that cost her more than any reproach could have. I am not clever, he said at last. I told you so, but I am not such a fool as all that, Miss Carew. I saw his face when he tried to wish us joy. I told myself it was the heat. He looked down at the little dog and smoothed its ears. You would have been kind to me all my life, I think that is the worst of it. I think you would have been kind to me every single day, and I should never once have known you were being kind instead of glad, because I had not the wit to tell the difference." He stood and set Cleopatra gently on the cushion, and made her a bow with more dignity in it than she had thought the man contained. "I would rather be told the truth in a chair," he said, "than worshipped in a fog for 30 years. You did once say something of the kind to me yourself, did you not? On the matter of staging." A rueful flush. "I shall go home to Hampshire. My mother will be insufferable for a season, and then she will find me someone who is glad and not merely kind. And I shall have had the honour of being refused by the future Duchess of Wexford, which is more than most men in my county can say over their port." He took her hand and kissed it, warm and dry and meaning. "This time, goodbye, be happy, Miss Carew. He looks at you the way my father used to look at my mother. I always wanted that. I am only sorry I wanted it from you. You are the best man I have refused all summer," she told him, and surprised them both into laughing, wetly, and it was the kindest sound the saloon had heard in a week. Lady Ottoline came to Rosalind that evening, in the gold guest room, of her own accord. She came without candles, in the last of the long summer dusk, and she stood in the doorway a moment as Rosalind rose from the window seat, and then she crossed the room and laid a folded paper on the writing table within Rosalind's reach, and stepped back from it as from something hot. "Read it," she said. "I have no taste for being taken on trust." Rosalind unfolded it. It was the letter to the town correspondent, the one that had not gone south at noon, and across the careful looped lines about Miss Aldous and £40,000, Lady Ottoline had drawn one diagonal stroke of the pen, and written beneath, in the same hand, "Disregard the whole. The matter is at an end. There will be no match but the one my nephew has made, and I will hear nothing said against the lady, by you or by any other, now or hereafter. Oh, see. You need not believe I have grown fond of you," Lady Ottoline said. Her voice was level, Rosalind heard, with a small shock, where the Duke had learned it. "I have not. I have grown something more useful, which is convinced. I watched him at dinner 2 nights running hand you the salt down the length of his own table and die of it by inches, and I told myself it was the price of the house. And I have told myself that particular lie for 30 years, about him and about others." Her thumb moved once at her side, over a hinge that was not there. "My brother could not be told anything, and I lost him to it, and I swore the boy should never go the same road. I have spent his whole life making certain he would never feel a thing where the world could see, and I see now that I did not save him from his father's fault. I only taught him to perish of the opposite one, quietly, where I had decided it was safe." She looked, for the second time, like the woman in the gallery. "Your father's letter was right, and mine were wrong. And I am 45, and have never said that sentence aloud before, and I find it is less fatal than I supposed. Be good to him, Miss Carew. He has had a great deal of management in his life, and very little of the other thing. I would not know how to give it to him. I am too old to learn. But I know it when I see it withheld, and I have withheld it long enough." She turned at the door, on the line that was meant to be remembered, as the truly skilled always do, but the line, this time, was a plain one. "I shall stay for the wedding," she said, "and I shall stand up in the church where the county can see a crew smiling on the match, which will do more to keep those doors open than anything you or he could contrive, and it is the last and best management I have in me. After that I shall go to Bath, and be a frost upon some other garden. Good night." And then, very low, almost lost, "He looks well already. I noticed it on the stair. I had forgot what he looked like. Looking well." She went. Rosalind set the crossed letter in the writing box beside her father's, 2 truths folded together, and stood a while at the window in the warm dusk, while the night stocks began below, and the first owl called across the darkening park. They were married in the last week of August, when the season had emptied London into the country, and the great honey-coloured house lay drowsing in the long gold light, and the roses in the parterre hung full-blown and heavy with the year's last heat. The dowager wore diamonds that had not been out of their case since the old king's jubilee, and wept exactly once, fiercely, into a handkerchief she afterward denied all knowledge of. Lady Otterline stood up in the church and smiled upon the match with such convincing graciousness that 3 managing mammas revised their entire understanding of the affair before the register was signed. Mr. Stanhope sent, from Hampshire, a very handsome epergne, and a note that said only to the gladdest woman in England, from a friend who knows the difference now, and Cleopatra, it was understood, sent her regards. And in the evening, when the guests had gone into the candles and the music, the Duke of Wexford took his Duchess out into the Rose Walk, where it had all begun, the gravel pale in the dusk, the fountain keeping up its small indifferent music, a bee gone home, and the lavender giving up the last of the day's warmth into the cooling air. "I have been reliably informed," he said, "by my grandmother, who had it from Mrs. Penhallow, who had it from the second footman, that I am to make precisely 1 observation of a dry character per evening, now that I am a married man and no longer obliged to be cold, and that I have not yet made mine today, and that the household has a small wager pending upon whether I am able. And are you able? I find," he said gravely, stopping where the path had once ended for him in air, "that some woman is going to be remarkably lucky to have me." He turned and took both her hands, the signet warm now between their palms, the workman's breadth of him no longer braced against anything in the world. "I was rather hoping it might be you." Rosalind laughed, the one startled note, then the whole of it, unclapped, unhidden, let go up into the summer dark where anyone in 3 counties might hear it and welcome, and she put her face against the warm open throat of her husband, where the pulse went steady and human and entirely seen, and the night stocks poured their reckless sweetness up the garden wall, and somewhere behind a lit window an old woman won her wager and said so, loudly, to no one. "You may tell the second footman," the new Duchess said, against his heart, that he has lost his bet, and that the Duke is hopeless, and that I would not have him 1 degree colder for all the open doors in England. The fountain sounded. A single rose let fall its weight of petals onto the warm stone, soft as a hand laid down. He kissed the top of her bright head, and they stood a long while in the place where the whole of it had started. 2 people who had each, at the last, chosen the door in front of them, and behind them, every window in the great house was lit, and behind every one of them, at last, there was someone home. If this story warmed you the way that summer warmed the Rose Walk, stay a while longer by the fireside with me. Tell me in the comments which line you would have chosen. Some man will be lucky to have you, or I was rather hoping for you, and whether you saw the truth of the father's letter before Rosalind did. Subscribe, and light the lamp again tomorrow evening, for there is always another door waiting to be chosen, and another quiet love learning, at last, to be seen. Good night, and sleep well.